If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. Your support helps us share more amazing stories. Stories about quiet love, emotional healing, and the life-changing moments that don't arrive with fireworks, but with whispers. Before we begin, take 1 second. If stories about quiet love, about emotional healing, about the kind of moments that don't explode but unfold slowly, mean something to you, then stay. Because some stories are not loud. They don't shatter the sky or crash through doors. They move gently. They breathe. They change lives without asking permission. This is one of those stories. The night didn't feel different at first. That was the strange part. There was no storm outside. No rain tapping against the windows. No emergency phone call slicing through the dark. No sudden news that turned everything upside down. Just the low, steady hum of the heater pushing warm air through the vents. Just the soft ticking of the kitchen clock marking time in patient, unbothered beats. It was the kind of ordinary winter night that disappears into memory before it even forms. The kind most people forget before morning. But Ethan Miller stood in the hallway of his modest Oregon home with a stillness in his chest that didn't match the calm around him. It wasn't fear. It wasn't excitement. It was something quieter than both. It was that subtle shift you feel right before something in your life changes. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. The house had once been built for noise. Footsteps racing down hallways. Laughter spilling from the kitchen. Doors closing too hard because emotions were too big for small rooms. Shared dinners. Shared mornings. Shared everything. Doors closing too hard because emotions were too big for small rooms. Shared dinners. Shared mornings. Shared everything. Now it held only two people who tried very hard not to need too much. And sometimes that kind of silence is louder than shouting. Ethan dragged a hand down his face. The tiredness in him didn't come from work. It came from carrying unspoken things. From holding himself together in ways no one could see. He turned toward the living room. That's when he saw her. Claire Dawson was asleep on the couch. A paperback novel resting open but forgotten against her chest. The lamp beside her cast a soft golden glow that touched her face carefully. As if even the light was afraid to wake her. Even in sleep, she looked heavy. Not physically. Emotionally. The kind of exhaustion that comes from pretending to be okay all day so you don't fall apart in front of people. Ethan stopped walking. He didn't want to disturb her. But he couldn't just leave her there either. The angle of her neck alone would punish her by morning. She had been living there for 3 months. Just until I figure things out, she had said back then. But heartbreak doesn't follow calendars. It doesn't care about leases or timelines or promises you make to yourself in brave moments. Her engagement had ended suddenly. Not with yelling. Not with betrayal. But with something worse. Certainty. The kind that arrives quietly and says, "This isn't love anymore." No bilin. No dramática enfrentación. Just two people realizing that something they once held tightly had slipped through their fingers long before either of them noticed. That kind of ending shakes your trust. In them. In yourself. In the future you thought was guaranteed. And Ethan understood something about futures that don't arrive. His divorce hadn't exploded either. It had faded. Slowly. Two people becoming polite strangers inside the same life. No screaming matches. No slammed doors. Just distance growing like frost across glass. That kind of ending leaves no one to blame. Only silence. Maybe that was why they understood each other so well. Two people bruised in ways that didn't show on skin. Two people who had learned that sometimes the loudest pain is the one no one hears. Ethan picked up the folded blanket from the armchair. He moved closer carefully, as if sudden motion might fracture something fragile in the room. When he draped the blanket over her, Claire stirred slightly. She murmured something he couldn't make out. His chest tightened. He hesitated, then made a simple decision. She'll sleep better in a bed. He knelt beside the couch gently. "Claire," he said softly. Not enough to startle. Just enough to guide. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused, trusting. "It's okay," he murmured. "Let's get you somewhere more comfortable." She didn't resist. Half asleep, she let him help her up. Her steps were slow down the hallway. Her weight against his arm was light, but real. The house felt different as they walked. As if the walls were watching. As if something quiet and important was happening. As if even the air understood it needed to be careful. When he helped her sit on the guest bed, she exhaled deeply and sank into the mattress. That should have been the end of it. Blanket tucked. Light off. Door closed. Simple. Safe. But Ethan didn't leave. He sat on the edge of the bed for just a second. And that second stretched. Because when you care about someone, your mind betrays you in still moments. He noticed how the tension had faded from her face in sleep. How her breathing had evened out. How the house hadn't felt this warm in years. He adjusted the blanket slightly. His fingers brushed her arm barely. But the contact sent something through him. Not desire. Not impulse. Awareness. Claire's eyes opened again. They didn't startle. They didn't pull away. They simply met his. And in that silence, something passed between them. Not confusion. Not guilt. Recognition. You don't have to do this, she whispered. Her voice wasn't pushing him away. It was giving him an exit. I want to, he said. The honesty in that sentence scared him. Because kindness had just crossed into something deeper. He stood abruptly, as if distance might restore order. Don't disappear tonight, she said softly. He froze at the doorway. Because leaving now wouldn't erase the moment. It had already happened. So he stepped back in. Not closer. Just present. He pulled a chair near the bed. But not too near. Close enough to mean it. Far enough to show respect. And Claire began to talk. About how pretending to be okay is exhausting. About how nights are harder than days. About how silence makes memories louder. Ethan didn't interrupt. Didn't fix. Didn't offer solutions. He listened. And in a world where everyone wants to speak, listening is a rare kind of devotion. Then he spoke too. About the slow death of a marriage. About how quiet endings sometimes hurt more than loud ones. About waking up one day and realizing the person beside you feels miles away. Two people. Setting down heavy things. At one point her voice shook. He almost reached for her hand. But he didn't. Restraint, sometimes, is the loudest form of care. Claire, he said gently. Just her name. Grounding. She smiled then. A real smile. I feel safe right now, she said. And that changed everything. Because safety is not small. Safety is sacred. The sunlight arrived softly the next morning. Not as a reset. But as a continuation. The understanding from the night before walked into the kitchen with them. They moved carefully around each other. Not awkward. Aware. They spoke honestly. About fear. About respect. About not rushing something fragile. Feelings had grown quietly. Without permission. And now they were choosing what to do with them. Like adults. Not like people trying to escape loneliness. Hope scared her. Losing respect scared him. So they chose patience. And patience, when chosen intentionally, is powerful. Life continued. Work. Errands. Dishes. Phone calls. But ordinary moments had weight now. Because awareness sharpens everything. That evening, they sat on opposite ends of the couch. Not because they had to, but because distance still mattered. It's strange, Claire said thoughtfully. How something as simple as being tucked in can change so much. Ethan smiled gently. It wasn't the blanket, he said. It was being seen. Nothing dramatic happened. And that was exactly why it mattered. They created boundaries. Spoke openly about pace. Agreed that honesty would lead. No secret expectations. No quiet assumptions. Just clarity. Care chosen slowly began to grow roots. One evening, Claire paused in the hallway. Thank you for staying, she said. Not just that night. In general. Ethan answered without thinking. Staying feels right. And for the first time in years, the house didn't feel like a place people had left. It felt like a place something was beginning. But beginnings like this don't happen in a single moment. They unfold. Like winter slowly giving way to spring. Like warmth returning to a room you forgot was cold. Over the next few weeks, something subtle shifted between them. Not in grand gestures. Not in sudden confessions. But in the small things. The way she lingered a little longer in the kitchen while he made coffee. The The way he asked about her day and genuinely waited for the answer. The way laughter returned, soft at first, cautious, then easier. They didn't label anything. They didn't rush to define it. Because they had both learned what happens when you force something to become what it isn't ready to be. Instead, they chose presence. One afternoon, rain fell steadily against the windows. Claire stood by the sink, watching it. "I used to love rain," she said quietly. "Before everything." Ethan joined her. "What changed?" "I started associating it with endings," she admitted. "The night he told me he wasn't sure anymore. It was raining." Ethan didn't try to rewrite her memory. He didn't say rain can mean new beginnings. He simply stood there beside her. After a moment, she glanced at him. "It doesn't feel heavy right now," she said. He understood. Because sometimes healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about experiencing something similar without the same pain. They weren't replacing what they'd lost. They were redefining what it could mean. Weeks turned into months. Claire began looking at apartments again. Not urgently, just thoughtfully. And one evening, she sat across from him at the dining table. "I think I'm ready to find my own place," she said. The words landed softly. Ethan nodded. He had known this moment would come. And the fact that it didn't feel like loss surprised him. "I'm proud of you," he said honestly. She studied his face. "You're not upset?" He shook his head. "No. Because whatever this is, it's not about needing each other to survive. It was about choosing each other to grow. And that difference changed everything." A few days later, as they packed some of her things into boxes, she paused. "Do you ever regret how things ended?" she asked carefully. "With my marriage," he clarified. She nodded. He considered it. "I regret the silence," he said finally. "I regret not speaking sooner. Not listening better. But I don't regret that it ended. Some endings are necessary for honesty." She absorbed that. "And us?" she asked. He stepped closer. "We're not an ending," he said softly. "We're a decision. And we get to keep making it." She exhaled slowly. That night, they didn't need to sit far apart anymore. Not because boundaries vanished, but because trust had grown strong enough to hold closeness. When he reached for her hand this time, he didn't hesitate. And she didn't either. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't cinematic. It was steady, intentional, real. Months later, the house looked different again. Not because furniture moved, but because energy did. There was laughter in the kitchen. Music playing softly on weekends. Conversations that didn't tiptoe around pain but acknowledged it as part of the story. Not the whole story. One evening, as they stood together watching the sunset through the living room window, Claire rested her head against his shoulder. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I used to think love had to feel intense to be real." He glanced down at her. "And now I think it has to feel safe." He smiled. Because safety isn't boring. Safety is brave. It's built. It's chosen every day. Love hadn't arrived like lightning. It had arrived like warmth returning slowly to a cold room. Through listening. Through restraint. Through quiet respect. That winter night hadn't been dramatic. But it had been a beginning. And beginnings built gently often last the longest. If this story stayed with you, you already know why. Because some moments don't shout. They whisper. And somehow they change everything. If you believe in quiet love, in second chances, in healing that happens slowly but surely, make sure you're subscribed. Because sometimes the most powerful stories aren't the ones that explode. They're the ones that unfold. And we have many more waiting for you.